of Reawakening Minds, and our Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey.
Take notes. We're going to deal with the specificity of definitions. What we wanted to do earlier, actually, because I was cutting tiles, so we didn't get a chance to go to the store. I wanted to get some buckets and use like a demonstration I used for the children in Kentucky a few years ago. And I was going to put like 4 containers with words and words under them, and present to you the definitions, but not the word. And then you will participate and say what the word is. Now, the reason for the exercise of specificity of definitions is to show you the damage that has been done with connotative linguistics, and also part of the mind control system that they've been using to make our people illiterate, what you call educated illiteracy. And a lot of times when you state it, people, don't take it serious, but they think, our mind, we can read for years, type thing. But when it comes to serious activity and response to the Roman operations in the Western Hemisphere and the world, it is important that you actually know what words actually mean, distinguish from what you assume that they mean. Because when you study us and our communities, we're damaged more than anyone else in relationship to European operations on the land. And so that's another reason why I wanted to present that exercise. So we'll abridge it slightly, but we'll still do that exercise. All right? Now, what I also wanted to share with you is chapter 8 from the Council of the Seven of the World. And I would please for you, for all of us to read it together in unison. And this is one of the most important chapters of script for the Aquarian age, for you coming out of darkness into marvelous light. So I wanted to share it last week, but I didn't have it last week, so I just put it up this week. So we will all read this together. And keep in mind, we want to print these out to make sure that you have a copy of this too, because it's a very important both history and philosophical presentment to protect you from the corruption of the priesthood. All right, it's almost. So let's read this together. The Mysteries of the Silent Brotherhood of the East, chapter 8. The Council of the Seven of the World. In every age since time began, but 7 sages lived. At first of every age, these sages meet to note the course of nations, peoples, and tongues, to note how far toward justice and love the race has gone, to formulate the code of law, religious postulates, and plans of rule best suited for the coming age. An age had passed, and lo, another age had come. The sages must convene. Now Alexandria was the center of the world's best thought, and here in Philo's home the sages met. From China came Menster, from India Vidyapati came, from Persia Casper came, and from Assyria Ashpenaz came, from Greece Apollo came. Matheno was the Egyptian sage, and Philo was the chief of Hebrew thought. The time was due, the council met and sat 7 days. And Menster rose and said, the wheel of time has turned once more. The race is on a higher plane of thought. The garments that our fathers wore have given out. The cherubim have woven a celestial cloth, have placed it in our hands, and we must make for men new garbs. The sons of men are looking up for greater light. No longer do they care for gods hewn out of wood. They seek for Allah not made with hands. They see the meanings of the coming days and yet comprehend them not. The time is ripe, And we must fashion well these garments for the race. And let us make for men new garbs of justice, mercy, and love, that they may hide their nakedness when shines the light of the coming days. And Vidyapati said, our priests have all gone mad. They saw a demon in the wilds and cast their lamps, and they are broken up, and not a gleam of light has any priest for men. The night is dark, the heart of India calls for light. The priesthood cannot be reformed, it is already dead. Its greatest needs are graves and funeral trance. The New Age calls for liberty, the kind that makes each man a priest, enables him to go alone and lay his offerings on the shrine of Allah. And Casper said, in Persia, people walk in fear. They do the good for fear to do the wrong. The devil is the greatest power in our land. As though a myth, he dandles on his knees, both youth and age. Our land is dark, and evil prospers in the dark. Fear rides on every passing breeze and lurks on every form of life, pardon me. The fear of evil is a myth. It is an illusion and a snare, but it will live until some mighty power shall come to raise the ethers to the plane of light. When this shall come to pass, the imagined land will glory in the light. The soul of Persia calls for light. This is one of the scripts that the priesthood all over the world don't want the masses to see. That's why we share it with you, to remind you of why the world is in darkness. Not just because the people lack knowledge, but the priesthood have actually been parasites on the backs of people and actually been working with one to steal the people's birthright and getting a benefit and pretending to share spiritual knowledge and history and philosophy with the masses when actually they've been operating for their selfish selves under the secret treaty of R.A.M. for all these centuries. And the world is going dark. People have gotten poorer and poorer. Miseries have gotten deeper, etc. And so this is why I share this chapter to remind people not to be deceived by the priesthood. Now keep this in mind. In relationship to this, when you all read Septuaginta, and where Yahshua says, first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It is very important for our people to understand that that statement carries in culture from time immemorial, and as long as humanity operates and communicates, that principle stands. It is unmoving, it is a maxim. And with that maxim, it is very important for us to have a clear understanding of meanings of words. And whereas, and in many instances, people don't have necessarily a knowledge of the etymology of words, the fundamental rule of etymology and etymology gives you the tools by which you can research yourself and then learn to know, which means you don't need to know immediately. Those are the tools by which you come to know. And so you would use those basic tools of etymology, basic, we're talking about elementary, degree, to liberate yourself from the darkness created by the priesthood and the Romans in partnership while pretending that they were separate. It's very important because, particularly as we move into the Aquarian light, the Romans are accelerating their corruption on the planet and around the world, particularly in North America, because they're being unseated. And so they're trying the best they can to destroy people's lives politically and economically as quickly as they can, and also physically with their biological warfare, chemtrails, GMOs, etc., and the pharmaceuticals, as aside from their direct hot fire war machines. But on the other hand, too, the very nature of us rejecting Rome, the strength of that energy, the sincerity with which and how we operate with our thought energy in rejecting Rome's falsehood and criminality and frauds and misrepresentations and misprisions, etc. This is where we appeal to the spirit of light, the spirit of our ancient mothers and fathers, and the spirit of all that is divine to come to your aid with sincerity. Sincerity is the key, actually. Because keep in mind, the divine law is that nature does not recognize personal station. She operates on merit and merit alone. This is why sincerity is key. And it's again why we're dealing with specificity of definitions. For those of you who have your dictionaries with you, don't hesitate to use them. We're basically going to deal with, say, your college dictionaries, etc., or your basic, unabridged dictionaries that have basic etymology in it. So we're going to present some words, and we're going to ask you to participate and present definitions, timeline, etc. All right. Movement. Let's go divine. Right? National. Movement. All right. And that's for starters. You got a dictionary up there, too. Yeah. Right, yes, to the left. Yeah. There's one to the left. Anybody grab that? The red one. All right. And someone share the mic. Now, basically, what I would have done, by the time, I do apologize for that, but this interchange and participation will help also. I would have taken the definitions and put them in the containers. And the word would be on the bottom of the container, but not the definitions. You read the definition, and then you present the word that goes with it. All right? And in doing so, what you will recognize immediately that people's concepts about a lot of things are incorrect. Now, when you look into Septuaginta, and it talks about the clearing of people's minds, the purging of people's minds from corruption, it makes the philosophical statement of separating the wheat from the chaff. Separating the wheat from the chaff, translated into the word, is separating the connotative presentments from denotation. Are we clear? Separating the connotative presentments from denotative meanings. Yet connotative presentments are presented to the masses as meanings right along with the denotation. That's one of the keys on how to miseducate people. Are we clear? Is there anybody who don't understand what I just said? Everybody clear on that? All right. So you want to distinguish the connotations, right, versus denotation. Now that's as a rule, and that you can say that's separating wheat in a way, from a philosophical point, from the chaff. Right? Now, look, as an example, go into connotations. Give me connotations, sis, and give her the mic. Hold it for a while she's doing her work, please. And use this exercise for yourself too, because it's a good method for studying. I always share this with my children because it'll help them. Because keep in mind, in the school systems run by the corporate entity operators, they will not refine that argument because they are part of the problem for miseducating the people, the children. So they're not going to make that argument. Connotation.
You want the first one or the last one? The act or process of
Now, this is what you would do. Now, again, this is why we're going through the exercise. All right? So the first thing you would do is give the part of speech, which would be right after the word. See, she's not in the mic. You don't have her in the mic.
Now.
All right, so connotation is a noun, right?
Yes.
So these are rules, right?
Yes.
The first thing that you do is put it in its proper part of speech, right? Let's go in general, everyone. How many parts of speech?
8.
Say it again.
8.
Sometimes 9.
All right, 8 parts of speech, right? Now keep this in mind, so we're going to set the rules, because these are basic grammar rules, so that we can deal with specificity of definitions. It's a noun. Now sometimes the word may be classified in 2 categories, sometimes, all right? And so you would pay attention to its context to see how it is used, all right? But the issue is to separate the connotation from the denotation. All right, sis. And then also make sure that while you're reading, give us the etymon. That's the brackets. When you see the brackets, go ahead.
The act or process of connoting, the configuration of suggestive or associative implications constituting the general sense of an abstract expression beyond its literal, explicit sense. Compare denotation.
All right, so it's an abstract, right? And not necessarily always the thing, is it? All right, so one of the things that we want to be aware of is sometimes they'll use a connotative presentment as a meaning when they're giving you a law document or legal document when they're trying to rob you, or they're trying to steal your property with a foreclosure, or they're trying to breach your inheritance that you should have gotten from your mother and steal it for the state corporate operators. They will present certain presentments in a connotative semantic angle, meaning one thing and not the other. And if you accept the connotative presentment as the absolute true meaning, they can deceive you, and they often do. And they do that to our people because they know our people violate this rule that we're discussing right now, specificity of definitions. And the specificity of definitions is the consciousness of separating the denotation, which would be the etymon, which would be harmonic with the etymon, from the connotation for the purpose of critical thinking, all right? So that's why we're doing the exercise, are we clear? All right. Now, give the definitions, and then you separate the denotation from the connotation and show us the etymology.
Number 3 is logic. The total of the attributes constituting the meaning of a term. Intention. Connotative, adjective. Connotativity, an adverb. Connote. To suggest or imply in addition to literal meanings.
Mm-hmm. So it's not necessarily specific, is it? Now, what is the etymon? What is the brackets?
Medieval in Latin, connotere, to mark in addition.
So, now, it's medieval, Latin, and then what you would do, and so that we don't drag it out and you don't get bored, you write that down and then you look that up and you put a timeline on it. So write that down. This is an exercise. You write that down. Now, if it was Middle English or Germanic, etc., you would do the same thing, and then you put the timeline on it, which would be a numerical estimated date of its practice usage in the language, and as it transfers or mutates from one language to another. Are we clear? And the reason you do that is because in societies where they're maintaining peonage that people refer to as slavery, that's connotated, that, you know, in that manner, they would present things which we call out of sequence of time. As an example, a practice here is common in North America for transferring or converting people's estates to back the private foreign corporation style as United States private debt for its owners on people who are not part of that order. Are we clear? And particularly people of Canaanite Moabite descent who are commonly known under connotative brand systems as Negroes, Blacks, Coloreds, West Indians, etc. Are we clear? So if they called you Black or Negro, you would not suspect that it had any negative intent if you didn't understand social engineering. Because you hear people throw those words around commonly, right? And you hear other people not contesting that. Is that correct? All right, now go into that same dictionary and look up the word black. And they'll relate it to a people as if it's a pedigree and an identity, which would be a connotative presentment. Are we clear? Including writing books, and in those books, taking the brand system that was set up by the German Dutch masters, mostly those from the Dutch East Pacific Company, right? For the purpose of converting their estates. This is what you call land thefts or land grabs. When you hear the Europeans refer to, particularly from the associates to the Whigamo Party, and after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, where it became popular for the European foreigners and aliens operating in the Western Hemisphere to start calling themselves white and start calling the Aboriginal people of the land blacks and Indians. It has a social purpose. It has a functional legal consequence. But when people aren't aware of it, they don't suspect it and they don't rebut it or challenge it and then suffer the consequence. It's another reason why we're doing this exercise in specificity of definitions. Now read black, please.
Being of the darkest achromatic
No, you never
visual
go
balance.
past the part of speech. Make sure that you,
Adjective.
all right, so you make sure that you don't do that to the children. Because remember in school, they're going to teach the child that black is a noun, the identity of a people. Do you see your connotative application already without going any further? Not because I say so, do you recognize it? It's important that you recognize it. Are we clear? All right, so it's an adjective. An adjective describes and it modifies. Does it identify? Does it identify? Question, does it identify?
No.
Why? If it was an identity, what classification would it be? Give him the mic. You moving the mic back and forth over here. It's important that you be clear because it's important that you teach the children. Because remember, one of the missionary works that we're doing purposely is clearing things up for the next generation. So they're not subject to the Christian black codes that we've been suffering. And that we're suffering even presently. And many people don't know they're suffering it. Because they've been trained to call it racism, which again is a incompetence, because it's not what's going on. Are we clear? Now, what is its etymology? Look in the brackets. I don't know what you're saying. You speak Chinese?
I'm trying to hold it without obstructing
Picking
the
you.
There are no brackets, it doesn't have anything in brackets.
All right.
There are a bunch of definitions though, there are at least 14 definitions.
Sometimes the etymology is at the end of all the presentments, and not
You
the
find it?
beginning.
Look at the brackets.
Middle English,
All right, so if it's Middle English, now we're dealing with the timeline. What's the timeline, Middle English?
1100 to 1500.
1728 to 1799. That's what it says.
You're working it too. What say, sis?
I'm sorry.
Timeline.
It says 1728 to 1799 in here.
No, Middle English.
Old English, that's all it is.
All right, so Old English now. Middle English is 1100 to 15, right? Right? And so that would be Middle English. As an example. Now, how many people claim to be scholars and in the name of scholarship who are controlling the education for our children will tell our people that's ancient Black Africa and write books and say ancient black gods and black pharaohs and black Jesuses and stuff like that? What does a scholar or person who has the capacity to read recognize immediately that that person is lying? A person who can't read, who don't know this rule, will usually absorb the presentment, which is really not the meaning. From that point on, that person who projected it controls the narrative and now controls your mind. And all they have to do, because they built a false foundation, all they have to do is what they refer to in social engineering as controlling the narrative. And once they set that foundation and it goes uncontested on the principle of not truth, but the principle of the strength of affidavit and unrebutted, it becomes the political reality, though not the truth. The person who accepts that later on along the path, if they're dealing in any contract law or laws of inheritance or estates, they can be and usually are escheated, which is why that practice was instituted in the first place. It was not an accidental presentment. That's what I'm presenting to you. Are we clear?
Clear.
Another scholar, say of your own, who have been taught by Romans, who work for Romans, would promote this because they would get a secondary benefit. And they will usually have a system. The system that they use currently is called a 501c3 Skull and Bones Agreement, set up by Lyndon Baines Johnson with their Negro leader guys who are appointed. They're not elected by the people, and they don't really, even though people think they do, work for the people, they work for Rome. This is why the negative amongst us continues. Now, a person who can read can see through them and see through their works by the words they present. A person who can't thinks that they're supporting them because they're saying things like, oh, they're racist, we need jobs, let us pray, and things like that. You know, and it sounds really innocent and they think it's spiritual. A person who can read and knows history and sociology, know that person's an operative. This is why it's so difficult for really rescuing our people in certain communities, because they cannot read. They do not know the rules of basic separation of the connotative presentments. And very often they'll say connotative means, no, connotative presentments as meanings, distinguished from definition, which is meaning, which is the etymon. So you look at the etymon and the denotation as harmonious, as supportive. Connotation is accepted in linguistics, usually when one takes liberty or one's doing an expression. But when it comes to refined thought, always be careful, because the connotation may be interjected for purposes untoward, not necessarily in your best interest. But it does not mean you don't use connotative linguistics. You don't use it without qualification, particularly when you're dealing with something specific of rescuing people. All right? Or as an example, say when the Pope of Rome appointed 72 scholars to address the Book of the Dead and Septuaginta to develop the Bible for mind control for the masses. Are we clear? People who don't know that history would take the Bible on its face value without consideration of its anthropomorphic presentment, without a knowledge of its derivative origins, and fall victim to mind control set up by Rome. Not that the book itself is wrong, the book is misrepresented. Are we clear? Now, if you notice as an example, particularly in the Western Hemisphere, but almost everywhere on the planet Earth where the Europeans have gone and taken the Bible, they've given the people the Bible and taken the land.
That's right. That's right. True.
And the miseries that the people later incur, they themselves, through that training, start attributing it to the mystical devil. Did it to them. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so they don't suspect that the priesthood are parasites, because they usually say words like Allah and Jesus and Muhammad. You get the point? And people get teary-eyed and they start giving their lunch money. No, they do, because they think that the presentments are or equal spirituality. So the issue is what they think is divine and spiritual in instruction. You ask the average person, and they will call that collectively spirituality. However, it's not necessarily true. So what I want you to look up is divine law. Look up divine, and you present that. You can do it, or you can share it with your neighbor, let her do it, and what we're going to bounce around and let you all participate. Because I want you to take on a frame of thought with this exercise, and then adopt this discipline for yourselves, even though it is a general practice that we present to you. And you all know when Brother Abdullah does a class, he will refine the argument for you. What I'm doing is dealing specificity and keeping it simple so that you can apply it in your everyday life. Because this is like third grade grammar that I'm talking at this moment. All right? However, what you discover when you talk to our people, it is a rule that our people, even as adults, do not use. And a lot of times when we're talking here, and Dr. Naila's, phone's been blowing up all week, and she can't get rest because she's phone secretary by default. She probably in there dozing off sleeping because they'd be wearing her out. But and the real deal of it is, on the political realm, because the Romans are accelerating their ongoing activity of hypothecating people's estates, because they're under pressure, because the world governments systematically, even though there's resistance and it's bouncing back and forth, are no longer accepting their private commercial T-bonds that they set up since the Civil War on the backs of our people, who they call Negro, Black, and Colored in West India. And that has been backing their debt since the Commercial Mercenary War. So write that down so that you can keep this clear in your mind. Commercial Mercenary War, presented to you in history books as the Civil War. Are we clear? And the reason I'm saying this is because these things are being brought up today in the forums of parliaments around the world. And it concerns you here particularly, although it concerns other nation states too. But what you recognize is our people have a tendency to be least cognizant of what's going on in real politics on the planet. You know, like we've been minimized on so many levels that we think that we're out of the loop and think that certain things that take place in the political forum has nothing to do with us when it has everything to do with you. Are we clear?
Clear.
And because for these last few years, we've been dealing with refined arguments and information sharing with you on things that concern these matters, it has come to the attention of people in government around the world, and particularly with the Europeans operating in North America, the United States Corporation Company. And so they've unleashed trolls to counter everything that we're doing. It's because when you become knowledgeable of what real politics are, you start dismantling the system without moving, just by the projections of your mind. They don't want you to know that. Neither do your most of your leader guys, imams, rabbis, reverends, the whole crew. Because all of them, with all due respect, have been guilty of participating in maintaining Rome's mind control systems over you, while hiding behind religion and not really teaching religion. Are we clear? Teaching secularism in the name of religion. So that's part of the mind control. As an example, let me give you an example. And this is true. And I don't want to say a falsehood, so I'll go under the estimate, all right? There's about over 50,000 versions of Christianity presented to the masses for mind control purposes. There's about 77 versions of Islam. When Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, informed the people that there should be no secularism in Islam. Islam is really a science of life. But when you look at the conditions of the world, masses of the world are caught within the web of these secularisms. And instead of actually developing culturally and with love, they're actually hating, murdering, and doing every foul thing in the name of Allah and in the name of Jesus on the planet Earth. They hide behind religion, the masses don't get religion. When you say that, a lot of people get sensitive because they think you're attacking them, but you're not attacking them, you're trying to liberate them. And so we're sharing with you again the specificity of definitions so that you can start liberating yourselves. Also, because of the nature of the venues that we address here at the House of Reawakening Minds, and for those of you who come to the Philadelphia territory at the York House at 5325 or York Road on Saturdays, you know that we deal with things to remedy our people that some people consider controversial. They won't call us liars. They'll say, you shouldn't be saying that. Who gave you the authority to tell the truth? You know, no, really, they won't do. What you find is when you start educating the masses, what occurs is you don't have to attack people who are less than honest or who control institutions that got their hand in your pocket. what it does, it overthrows institutions that aren't honest. And to tell you the truth, 90% of all institutions are not honest and not even necessary. They're duplicitous, and most of them are based on extortion by using guilt, fear, superstition, very little remedy, no recourse, and artful complaining about the miseries of humanity. The art of, really, brother, he's got the white look. He's racist. He said really good. Really racist. Oh, boy, that brother said that, man. This is what we're into. It fixes nothing, solves nothing. Meanwhile, R.A.M. trying to take his account. They steal his grandmother's house that he should get inherited. And the owners of the corporate franchise states, in the name of sovereign power, taxing him out of it. And these are the things that are really the injuries, and why the priesthood keep you preoccupied with belief systems while you get raped and they split the spoils with the state. I want to remind you all that in the Western Hemisphere, the major source of the wealth of the church came from the priesthood and bishopric declaring women who had any knowledge witches, torturing them, stealing their estate, and the majority would go to the bishopric, and splits would go to people like Torquemada, Thomas de Torquemada, that whole operations of the Inquisition now becomes the IRS. And this is again why people's concepts must be corrected, specificity of meanings, specificity of definitions. And as you already know, the priesthood has the whole world under mysticism. There's another reason why I'm going to read this. If you don't give me $5 so I can split with Jesus and stuff, and make sure I make charity, if the mosque did, etc. God's hand did. The lead group was leaking. Don't trip. Can you read hell from the law book? From Black's Law Dictionary. Now, most of you know, and I don't have to really emphasize this with you, that most of our people are scooped up with this word hell. Fear that they're going to hell if they don't give Reverend Jones $5 for Jesus and $5 for him. Make it 10. But, they give you an envelope, make sure it's 50. They put ATMs in them places now. But, no, money is root of all evil, right? But see, they can purify it. They got God's cell phone, they got direct connection with a personal relationship. And this is, they play on people's guilt, fear, superstition, and they've been raping the masses. And very few people have been challenging them. Now you see the story of Yahushua challenging the priesthood, and that's why the priesthood got rid of him. Stealing widows' pennies. And they said the devil did it. It was the priesthood did it. And guess how many adults, even after reading the book, Septuaginta, Latin or Hebrew, Torah, Pentateuch, Hexateuch, Bibles, and will say that the devil, Jesus was doing good stuff and everything, freeing the people and stuff, and then here comes the devil and stuff, because they're doing all this good praying and stuff. Jesus' mind is on business and stuff. And then the devil came and stuff. No, it was the priesthood. The priesthood. A child can even see it in the book, but do you know how many adults follow that party line of raising money to kick the devil's ass? We're messing with Jesus. And nobody pays attention to the priesthood, who is really working with Rome. And them same priests, to this very day, promote to the masses that there's a separation of church and state, and they've never been separate. The church belongs to the state, and the state belongs to the church. you understand? Go ahead, interject.
Page 857 of Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, all right?
Yes.
Hell, the name formally given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined.
Say it again. Say it very clear.
The name formally given to a place under the exchequer chamber where the king's debtors were confined.
Now, so you see why they start teaching the adults in the mentality anthropomorphic of children and saying that hell beneath the ground and hot place, because that's what it usually was: hot, sweaty, and dirty. And anyone that didn't pay the 10% Roman tax, which is called a tithe, were thrown into a hole underneath the church, the exchequer's chambers. That was hell. Now, as the priesthood have deceived the world, now they think that hell's a place to go. And the Bible, the Quran, the Waspi, and the holy books, for those who violate divine law, so to speak, they're going to be cast in hell, and that's their concepts. Are we clear? There's no reason I'll read this chapter to you, and I want you to remind yourself of this chapter. Because if you are, with all due respect, and it's not personal, to be liberated, the priesthood must be taken off your back. No one can do it. You must do it, and you must do it willingly. I'm not talking against them. I'm just talking of what they do and who they really are. You can do with it what you please to. However, we have given you and will give you enough information and enough reference that you yourself should know by now, after these many generations, that they cure nothing, that they're actually parasites.
Wow.
You know, this is another reason why even a lot of people who have this knowledge don't want the masses to have the Book of the East, if you get the point. And remember, your fundamentals of all your religious world, of all the philosophies, come from the East. But yet, they will do derivative operations and then deny the East. Will condemn the East if it's wrong, and they've gotten their knowledge from the East. Are we clear? Just a reminder to you. And keep in mind that the priesthood have all the books. Like say, for instance, in a private conversation, if I'm talking to a rabbi, claim to be a Jew, he'll talk that stuff to the public, but if I'm talking to him, I tell him, there ain't no damn such thing as Jew. And that's what they're great. It's Yahudi, and probably you ain't a Jew, so don't even come that way. Don't come that with me. You do that with somebody that don't know scholarship. And in public, in private, they won't debate because you don't tell the truth. In public, cast thee out of the devils and shit.
Right.
You start that stuff. Kill him. They start that stuff. And the masses come to you, we run down the street. The believers trying to kill you because they think you're against Allah and Jesus. They do. And you just threw them a life raft. This is, again, why this lesson, specificity of definitions. Because some of the things that we critique and present to you in critical thinking, we don't want you to think that we're attacking any organized group or any organized people or anybody's belief. We want you to know whatever you do, whatever you claim, know what you're claiming and know what you're doing. Make an intelligent decision in what you do. And in truth, true religion does not teach belief systems. True religion teaches knowledge. Are we clear? True religion does not promote belief systems. Dogmatism and dogmata systems promote belief systems. Are we clear? And I know you've heard me say this many times, and I mean it sincerely. The masses don't get religion, the masses get dogma. The priesthood keeps religion for themselves. And for their protection, their greed, and their economic benefit, 99% of all priests, I don't care whether they're Muslim, Christians, or Jews, in secret are Masons. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Masonry is not a negative. Masonry is essentially the preserved knowledge of the ancient world and humanity on the planet Earth. And we're not talking about the criminal acts that people in these different fraternal orders may adopt for themselves, distinguished from what these things mean. If you want to, on the surface, understand what Masonry is and means, simply look at the mothers in this room. That's for you sons. And then when you go to the bathroom, pull up the shirt and look at your belly button. And know who made you. Your mother, and you're the son. And the study of the dynamics of the human species on the earth, the mother is a stargate, and you're her son. And Allah is a feminine name, and it applies to womanhood herself, and not a masculine figure with a turban sitting on the throne over top of the Kaaba in Mecca. And that's an exaggeration, but I'm just saying that to say that people's concept about what they think things are and what priesthood really know for themselves in scholarship are two different things. But if you tell the people the truth, most of these clubs will not survive. You get the point? Meaning that most of these well-dressed, robed guys that claim got a personal relationship with Jesus, God, Allah, Moses will have to get a J.O.B. Meaning they'll have to start producing something for real. And knowledge supersedes their capacity to use mind control, hypnotism, emotionalism to tell you finally that God's broke and he needs $5. But God's got everything, but he's always broken. And I just want to remind you this week, because apparently y'all forgot it last week.
Jesus loves you.
Did you say that last week? I mean, I'm convinced. What's next? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to be humorous, but it's really cruel what they have done to humanity. And it appears innocent, and it has gone unchallenged. Well, here it's challenged, and we ain't going for it. Because we know that they've been working with Rome. We got the evidence that they've been working with Rome, and all scholars have the evidence that they've been working with Rome, but very few people will speak up because they're also murderers. And usually when people that really do scholarship find these things out, they will murder them. Particularly when they find out the relationship of the political realm and the dogmatic realm that is presented to the masses as the spiritual realm. If you get the point. For those of you who know anything about the economic systems and politics and the military ordnance systems, what order on the planet Earth is the largest stockholder in world arsenals? If you know, don't speak, raise your hand. If you know. I see one. Look around the room, you all. Look around the room. Look around the room. I'm going to repeat this question to you. And I would like you to look at your own selves and critique the response. The largest stockholder, organized order on Earth planet, Gaia, is what political order? Raise your hand. Look around the room, y'all, because y'all looking all forward. Now, look at this. Look at the people that's in this room and understand that your mothers and fathers and grandmothers and grandfathers and all that kind of stuff, aunts and uncles, and our community is suffering terribly. And if you don't know what's up, what your chance do these children have? We're just talking about just reading, just words itself. Now we're just talking about the politics that's connected to them words. The largest stockholder of the arsenals on planet Earth is the church of home. They're the largest stockholders of the world's arsenals that murder people on the planet Earth. But they always talk about God's love and peace. So apparently when you go into that book, and the people say they know, it says somebody's presenting themselves as the peacemakers, but they're really the peace breakers.
That's right.
And the masses keep looking for the mystical devil. And the ones that's regulating it keep in tune with the communities. This is a network, and reporting is standing right there under the tinfoil window behind a pole pit. They never suspected that they're vampires. Scholars know, but they're dangerous vampires too. You know, so these people who don't really understand the real history, the real law, divine law, the ancient books, don't know that that vampire is eating some of the missing children and raping them too. And got a skull and bones agreement with the Vatican. And they actually have shadow houses in every community that regulate the community. They even tag, say, 20 years ahead, whose houses they want to take. And they'll have plans laid out on how they're going to alter and modify the cities, and you be thinking that you're stable. And that you think that the members of the Circle Church and the Chancery are doing Jesus things and things for the Lord of Jesus. And they're working for the Lords of London. And they're right in your face. They're called lawyers and bankers. There are the direct members of the Circle Church. The Chancery. Did you notice that when they steal these people's houses, and they will be sending you instruments from law offices claiming to be courts, they'll present arguments for those who challenge you in Chancery Court? Did you notice that? How many of y'all know that? If they hearing an argument on a house foreclosure, if it goes in courts, it's going to Chancery. Controlled by the Chancellor in England. By Knights Templars, who are members of the Circle Church, working with the bankers, and the bank is really the bench collection arm for the Vatican. Are we clear?
Wow.
And I'm saying that to you because a lot of the things that we're dealing with people, particularly people that become cognizant of the miseries that are taking place on the planet, is because the Romans are liquidating people's estates. And we want you, on your own merit, to be able to competently start countering or rebutting Rome's claims against your estate without us having to be redundant, be going over things over and over and over again. That if you use certain fundamental rules in reading, that you will begin to solve your own problems. Are we clear?
Clear.
Are we clear?
Clear.
All right. Good. Give Brother Mike, and then give the mic to Brother Troy. After that.
Turn on,
Go ahead.
turn on.
Just wanted to,
Turn it on.
Turn it on.
just wanted to read Chancery.
Chancellor, go ahead.
Equity, equitable jurisdiction, a court of equity, the system of jurisprudence administered in courts of equity. That's what Chancery is.
All right, now, when you all get used to this, and another reason I'm bringing this up, you know, how many of you were here just this past week when Brother Clemento was here? and he was giving you some refined instruction. Excellent class. A class like that actually should be a workshop. But I think you did an excellent job, and it's an indicator of what our intent is for you. But we want you to be competent. I'll be clear. We don't want to load you with things and then you just accept things and you really, upon a test, don't get it. That's why a lot of times when I'll present, I'll tell you to raise hands. And you see how many hands were raised of these adults in this class? So I always take the position of not trying to overload, because clearly the indicators are that many things that are basic you're not paying attention to, or you're not absorbing. You understand? And we want you to cure. We don't want you to, oh man, that was tight, man, and clap. We don't want that. You know, we want, if you're going to play basketball, be able to dribble. You know, if you're going to get in the boxing ring, you know, don't start taking selfies. You know, hold that left hand up, cover face, defend yourself. Jab. You know, don't get in the ring talking about, you know, what did you say about jabbing? But meanwhile, the guy goes, ow! You don't really want that. And a lot of the injury happens to us because we don't know basic rules. Are we clear? Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, please go ahead. Via
Just point of interjection about
point of interjection. Go ahead.
about the definition.
Point of introduction. Go ahead.
About the definition from Black's Law Dictionary again. Page 71.
Page 71, Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Adult. Civil law. A male infant who has attained the age of 14. A female infant who has attained the age of 12. All right, so adult. Just a point of order.
Now, make it clear again.
All right. Oh, jeez.
Speak from what you know.
All right, it's in a big baby, in other words, an adult, infant.
Yes.
And so to call ourselves adults,
Does
we're
not necessarily mean maturity.
right.
However, this is the key. Now back up again, and this is back to where assumptions are. Assumptions. Read that again, and I'm going to explain that to you. Read it very clearly, distinctly.
Adult, civil law, a male infant who has attained the age of 14, a female infant who has attained the age of 12.
Go ahead.
And then common law, one who has attained the legal age of majority, generally 21 years, though in some states women are legally adults at 18. And then it goes into the res judicata.
All right. There's two things that are presented here. And this is where you must understand divine law and nature's law, distinguished from political and legislative operations, as an example. Female always matures quicker than the male because female is purer than the male. Male is a modified female. All eggs are females. So mothers makes her sons out of her own self-daughter. When the cell splits, it's called a daughter cell.
Islam.
So we're talking divine law distinguished from what people believe. In proper cultivation and civilization, the education of the fetus or Muslim, which is a fetus, it's not a belief system. Muslim is a fetus. And a Muslim must submit to the will of Allah, which is the mother. For what she builds in the temple, in her womb, manifests as the temple of man. In true, proper culture before Roman Inquisition operations that put the world back over 500 years. The education systematically done on points of 3, and the evolution of the moon on a triplicity of the 3, the triple 3 of the 9, right? And based on Ezekiel's wheel or the chart, because the woman would deal, woman being a walking calendar on 13, which is why the dark priesthood will not acknowledge a 13th floor to a building. They'll call it a mezzanine. You get the point. Is because woman is the walking calendar, and also the natural order on the earth planet is a matriarchy in government principles. When the culture or the applied science of the number 9, the workings of the womb, is applied in proper culture, the child, according to the nature of the constellation and the energies that the mother puts into the temple of the body, she teaches the child accordingly. This is one of the reasons why it was very important from a political perspective for the Romans to burn libraries around the world. In what is called the Great Book Burnings, you're talking about Ligrorum, Index Ligrorum, Expurgatorius, Index Librorum Prohibitorum. And it is not unlike what we're talking about the priesthood here. They themselves know that the children come out the womb already educated. Are we clear? When the mother knows the truth of the workings of the womb and the power of the womb. Therefore, the priesthood will never teach women the truth about religion. Why? Because she's Allah. And she has been overthrown.
Yeah.
Are we clear?
Clear.
Now, the nature of things. In harmony with the 12 constellations that rule this particular solar system, that point of 12 represents maturity. If taught properly, at the age of 12, females totally competent, except in a society where she has not been taught.
Islam.
Are we clear?
Islam.
Now, the Son of Man, well, the Son of Man is the Son of Woman. Woman is man, it's the species. It's not gender. Paternity, pater, father, is a process, not the gender.
Islam.
So, truthfully, all there is mother.
Islam.
Truth. And we are the sons of God. Are we clear?
Islam. Clear.
What is it that the priesthood don't want the people to know? What I just said. So they want to keep these children in the infant mind so they can rape them. Are we clear?
Clear.
Clear.
Now the sons, because we're Y, so that's why we hot. You know what I'm saying?
Skippy.
And she's the X. X marks the spot. Right?
Islam.
And so we were always like 2-3 years behind. Like when we growing up and stuff. Because even with us, even now, most men go basically kind of like we stay boys. And we front, like when sisters come around, we're like, they leave, man, we be playing and doing stupid shit. We do. We can have an old piece of junked up car. It's a stick too. We don't care about what's showing up. Sis comes around, we want to do mags and all that stuff, polish in the car like we care. No, let's be honest. So there's a balance. Mother refines us. You know what I mean? Like us, you know, hey, we can have pocket full of Fiat, sleep on the floor, sleep in the chair, with a soda, some popcorn, looking at TV. They come in, we'll be straightening stuff up like we, yeah, let me fix this and stuff. Trying to impress somebody. You know, but I'm just saying, we skateboards, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're really absolutely like that, but for the most part, we skateboards. So, by nature, women mature quicker than us. Politically, for political purposes and extortion, the priesthood suppressed women mentally so that they can use the mental themselves to suppress their other developments. Are we clear?
Clear.
Then the priesthood can feed on them. Are we clear?
Clear.
Particularly if they can keep them naive because they will deliver their children to them. And they do. They do. Now when you're dealing with inheritances, go into wardship tenures. Wardship. Get rid of Mike. I want you to look at this because this is absolutely connected, you all. And I'm glad that you're bringing these things up, Dee, because you have insights, and I'm appreciating that. But I wanted to show you how this is all related. Wardship tenures. Go into your Black's Law Wardship. W-A-R-D-S-H-I-P. And this is also important because this would give you an understanding of why certain things we say consistently and why we say to you these things are important. Because they may not appear to you important if you're not aware of the politics, the real politics, not what they tell you, the actual politics and the actual economics. Let me also remind you this. You know what is practiced by Europeans who operate under European colonial operations in the Western Hemisphere? That they teach each other, particularly in secret societies and in economics? It is important that the masses never discover that labor generates capital. Capital does not generate labor. But they must be encouraged to believe that capital generates labor. This is so that you would never value your labor for your real skills. This is another reason why it's important for them to miseducate you and make sure that you don't pay attention to the etymon, separating the wheat from the chaff, separating the denotation from the connotation. It doesn't mean you dismiss connotation, it means you must use it always cognitely. Are we clear?
Clear.
And particularly when you're reading any legal document. Are we clear?
Clear.
And so it's also important for you to recognize that harmonic with that is in government structure, you're not looking at synonyms, but you're looking in the area of synonyms and antonyms, etc., like that. You can look at the republic and allodial principles, harmonic, and then you look at feudal law and the democracy platform as harmonic. Are we clear? So the robbery of the people institutionalized is done under the democracy platform. If you're not thinking critically, you may not be one who paid attention to that. Are we clear?
Yeah.
Nevertheless, scholars know that. They know that the democracy platform is mobocracy. And that the republic platform recognizes statesmanship and the allodial rights of the people. They are actually opposite poles. And much of the misery economically and politically that people suffer is that they are being governed de facto under democracy platform set up in 1861, counter to and in contradistinction to the Republic platform that was set up under the legitimate organic constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, i.e. all persons operating in the government at North America, federal, state, and municipal, etc., or local, are imposters and de facto, they're all criminals since 1861. It has nothing to do with what they tell you or what their intent is, or that's my cousin and you like them. They're all organized criminals. And this is why you're in the misery. This is again why they're liquidating people's estates, because, which we talked about before, the conversion. We don't need to get into that. You already know that. We've done it redundantly, but you need to know what that is. And again, why we chose this subject matter tonight, specificity of definitions. Because when we ask certain questions, opening up, we don't want to see a whole room full of adults and then 3 people raise their hand on elementary subject matter that's affecting your life every day. Which is why most of you are here. We're here for remedy, not to feel good. Feel good is but we're here for remedy. And so I'm telling you, that's our intent. Our intent is remedy and recourse, all clear. We're not here to make you feel good, and we're not here to pump fake spirituality at you. We're here to honestly, with true desire and intent, for us all collectively to become more competent and for us to start preserving our estates for ourselves and for the generations to come. All of which, at present, are under siege, and what you have left is under attack. Being cognizant of it is important, because what you recognize that many people aren't cognizant that the hypothecation activities are rampant and they're going on. They think it's circumstantial. My cousin next door, man, they foreclosed on his house and stuff, and they came yesterday and took all his stuff out and stuff like that and put it on the curb and stuff. And I seen the sheriff and his boys, and they stole the TV and stuff. And that's in our communities is becoming a norm. However, the general masses are not aware is that the action is unlawful. 2, you can't foreclose on a contract that was closed unless you have an action of fraud. They don't know that all property, including your labor, has been hypothecated for the barristers of England and the general operators of the Board of Governors for the Federal Reserve of the Bishopric Circle Church and Chancery in England on behalf of the Popes of Rome, enforced by the United States Service Military Operations and the subdivisional operators in contract of the gangs of New York who made contracts with the Circle Church and the Chancery and called themselves policemen. So the people don't recognize they're really organized gang. They're not law officers. We're not talking about what the individual persons may be or what their intention may be. We're talking about what the real politics are. Are we clear?
Clear.
And usually when they're stealing people's property, they will be on the door or across the street. Even though by law, the sheriff is the one supposed to issue writs of execution. With a raised seal court order of an Article 3 judge, whereas the claimant or the right or tenant must be taken and challenged in a court of law on due process. Not only that, if it were a foreclosure, any emoluments and anything in escrow and any generated funds from the promissory note was supposed to be delivered to them. They robbed them, and it's usually more than what the house costs anyway. You know, and so all of these things are done every day, and we don't have to tell you that. Most people don't even know that these activities and these aspects of mortgages and the transfers of separation of the mortgages and the promissory note that generates finance on the stock market, etc., that already compensate for the house, etc., and sell off. That's what we return to these people, even when they do foreclose. So really, on most of these foreclosures, if they told the truth, even if they did foreclose, they would have to give you, in your hand, physically, finance that's usually more than what that house costs, and you'd simply be able to go out and buy another one. They're gonna rob that too and rob the estate too. Which is again why we're doing specificity of definitions. Go ahead, please.
Yeah.
You're going to interject.
Wardship.
Wardship. Write this down, you all.
In military tenures, the right of the Lord to have custody as guardian of the body and lands of the infant heir, without any account of profits until he was 21 or she 16. In Sokich, the guardian was accountable for profits, and he was not the lord, but the nearest relative to whom the inheritance could not descend. And the wardship ceased at 14. In copyholds, the lord was the guardian, but was perhaps accountable for profits.
All right. So now, when the Congress adjourned sine die, in 1861.
I forgot to tell the page 1755 of Black's Law Dictionary. I apologize.
Say it. Okay.
It's page 1755, Black's Law Dictionary, fourth edition. I apologize.
Now you would go. Now we're not going to do this exercise, but we want others to write this down. So you're going to do this in your spare time because we don't have to keep repeating classes. Minor, minority, appropriate persona, status, and estate. And then I'll continue back to the issue of the 12 and the 14 and the 16 and the 21. All right? So now you're talking estate law. And what Woodrow Wilson was setting up in 1913, and this is why we share with you all House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session June the 5th of 33, and remind you all to break that down and pay attention. And one day we're going to go maybe through the congressional record and deal with Louis McFadden's speech and plan to sue the Board of Governors for the Inquisition Revenue Services, which you know as the Internal Revenue Services. That is the Inquisition Revenue Services for conversion purposes. And that only exists because of the democracy platform. Keep in mind that could not exist under the Republic platform. I'm clear?
Clear.
All right, so on the 27th, when they did sine die, there was actually a coup d'etat. Now, this is for you, those of you who don't know. Many of you know, but I don't want to go into that because we've been over it over and over again. You've got to understand this. Within the 10-year span, generally, with the Act of Congress of February 2nd, 1871, that's when they perfected, in that span between 61 and 71, their democracy political platform. That means all of the members of the Circle Church and the barristers were inculcated into Congress in breach of Article Amendment 13 with its 20 section, i.e. the nobility clause, with the specific purpose of institutionalizing peonage and connotative slavery at North America, with the intent that the masses be not aware that it was instituted. Are we clear? They set up Negro universities, and some of you know their names, but I'm not going to go into that because some people's feelings get hurt. For the specific purpose of grooming Negroite leaders to be appointed in tagged communities that these people do not know what a mortgage is, that they do not know what an allodial title is or aboriginal title is, and that these allodial instruments were modified in 1913 by Woodrow Wilson in agreement with members of the Circle Church, Knights Templars, and all the barristers, British Registry, etc., and hide from the people that the United States is really a private corporation belonging to the Jesuits. So the job of the Negroite leader guys and their training was to teach you and promote the brand system, meaning that, like, instead of teaching the people the truth of their bloodline or pedigree, they would teach them that there's light-skinned people and there's dark-skinned people and then there's black people, and brown is really black, and so is copper is really black, and things like that, and train the people like little boys and girls and monkeys that this is linguistically and anthropologically correct and scientifically correct. And with a few generations that they would be able to control the narrative and the people would actually adopt these as identities. And then the corporate state could escheat their properties and their land and then give grants and patents to Europeans. And then block the heirs of the estates from claiming their lands because they would be listed outside of the human family under non-begeer and would not be aware that a mortgage and a deed is a sharecropping agreement.
That's right.
Are we clear?
Yes.
And so they would start working to get a mortgage and get a deed and not knowing that they're sharecropping, and after a couple generations wouldn't even know what an allodial title is or that it ever even existed. And so that's what Wilson did in 1913. Now, cutting through the chase, when the corporate entity went bankrupt again, actually prior to 1925, they re-registered again. But it actually broke down twice. And so in 1933, and this goes from 32 and 34, Lewis McFadden made issue with it and was bringing suit. In 1933, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, European, used, because they had already used a claim